I am in London today with my friend Oliver Banks. He is a fellow top retail expert. He is also a podcast host, a book author, and a specialist in digital transformation. He wrote a book that I love that is called Driving Retail Transformation, and I want to know everything about it. Oliver, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Paula. It's lovely to be here with you.
Here's Paula Macaggi, and this is episode 19 of my show. Welcome to OFFBounds. Who is going to interview who today?
Let's find out. Who do you think?
How many transformations have you worked on?
Oh, blimey.
Let's just start with that.
Do you know what? I have no idea. It would take a little while to count up because I've been doing this for a little while, actually, and doing it with a number of clients. As a consultant, I was at Tesco beforehand as an internal consultant, doing a number of different change and transformation initiatives there.
I just imagine that you have a lot of, I think every case is a particular case. So you have a lot of expertise that you wrote the book and mapped out the stages of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But my question is a transformation a decision, let's transform, or is something that you keep working on nonstop?
Great question. And my answer is both, I would suggest. So I very much view a transformation as a journey. So it's a recognition, like you're going on a car journey. You are in place A and you say, let's go to place B because that's interesting because we want to go there for whatever reason. And you make a intentional decision to go to place B rather than just meandering and just seeing where you go, right? That's not a good way of taking a journey. But at the same time, when you get to position B, the world has evolved and you're going to want to go on to position C. So an ongoing transformation, if you will. You can't just do one transformation and say, right, that's it, we're done, we're completed, we're in our final end state, because the world continues to evolve. And if we just get to that position B and stop, we'll get left behind.
I just think technology is going so fast, is driving changes so fast. Consumers are changing quickly because every day you have a new social channel, every day you have to learn something new. I think it's really hard to not transform yourself if you just keep going. But I think that's two differences here. One is I'll set the trend, and the other is I would just go with how the world is changing.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Absolutely. You could take quite a backseat approach, if you will, to say, I'm going to look at what my competitors are doing. I'm going to look at the top trends and just do that. And in many ways, you couldn't go too far wrong. But what you would do is it would be very incoherent to your customers, to your colleagues, and you're not in control at the end of the day. So, if you just say, oh, okay, everyone's talking about TikTok at the moment, let's do TikTok. Or everyone's talking about this or that. Or, how many of us took the road down the metaverse and went in too deep and invested too heavily just because everyone was talking about it, for example? But actually, say we want to be intentional, we want to be in control. I call it sitting in the driver's seat to take advantage of that. And you are steering, you are choosing where you're going. There's so much going on in the world, absolutely. Customers are continuing to change. Technology is continuing to change. The wider environment is continuing to change in terms of politics, the competitive arena, aspects like sustainability. There's so much going on. And, there's too much, in fact, to do everything. Overwhelm is a big challenge. So you've got to pick and choose, in my view, intentionally, using that word again, pick and choose intentionally. Where are we going to make the best bang for the buck, essentially?
I was talking to a retailer last week, and he joined the company to do the turnaround. So turnaround is a transformation that comes from the bottom, right? You have to pick the company back up. And he was like, okay, first week on the job, I want to know every project that we are working on. And when they reached the number 300, he was like, okay, well, let's just stop right here. Let's change it to 15 projects. Let's select what is the best because there's opportunity everywhere. We have to focus what is the right opportunity for us. 100%. Do you have an example that you've worked? That's something 100%.
Like that? So there's lots of companies that have so many opportunities, and prioritization is a big challenge because we look at the long list essentially and we go, oh, well, that's really important. That's high priority. That one, well, that's really important as well. And what happens? You end up with your, let's say, 300 projects or initiatives, and they're all high priority, and you're straight back to square one with no wiser idea. And actually, it's really crucial to be able to ruthlessly prioritize those initiatives and within those initiatives as well, because any given idea you could explode out and have an infinitely big scope as well. And I think prioritization is one of the essential skills that is really going to separate the successful retailers of tomorrow from those that are more mediocre.
And where does the transformation decision comes from? Is it the leadership or the team? I think a lot of the culture of the company is involved in it. Can you change the company culture to drive innovation and transformation?
Can you change company culture? Yes, absolutely can, but it's a really tough nut to crack. Culture is embedded in a company for a number of different reasons, and it shows up in our behaviors that happen from the top all the way down through every level of the hierarchy. And so actually to change that culture, you've got to make wholesale change across the entire company, and it's got to be really led very effectively. And it can be particularly tough if you've got the same people in place, acting in the same way. It's a tough one to call, but it is possible. And I firmly believe every company can change if they choose to.
You have a chapter in your book that is about the people, the skills that the people should have. What are those? And if I want to go through a transformation, I should look for these qualities in people, right?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few chapters on people. It's a really, obviously, important element of transformation because nothing happens without people, any shape or form. And I think from my view, there's a couple of different ways of looking at this. There is you as a leader driving the transformation. What are the characteristics, the behaviors, the attributes that you have and you hold? And then as you look for the team that support you on that transformation, how do you build a coherent team that is ready to approach both the technical elements of change as well as the more cultural elements of change as well? And then, of course, there's the wider organization, which in retail is made up of, particularly physical retail, huge frontline teams, which all have their own cultures. They may be really broadly dispersed over vast geographies, different languages, different sort of subcultures, different hierarchies, etc., etc. And actually, that's a really important element to consider. Often that frontline is the customer of the change. And actually, how do you make your transformation customer-centric with that customer of the change in mind?
That's the thing with retail, right? Like there's the front line, the actual people that deal with your customers.
Yep.
And I think like the headquarters should serve the front line. And I think that should be a mindset that all retailers should have. Do you have
100% agree.
Do you have a case to share with us, someone that you really admire the transformation that they went through?
So I think one of the transformations that is very much ongoing actually is that of M&S, which is a great British retailer, long heritage, and it's had quite a roller coaster heritage as well. It's certainly struggled in the past, but right now they've made a number of really excellent strategic changes, really driving up the quality and the presentation of their food business, and their clothing business is following as well, and their home business as well. And that is an excellent example of a case study of a company that has got this long heritage. It's got obviously a culture embedded in, and the current leadership are doing an excellent job of driving that forward. The current frontline are also doing an excellent job. It doesn't feel like an M&S store of old. When you go into some of the latest stores, it's fantastic. And I think that's just a superb case study.
Yeah.
M&S has been in the case study books for business books.
We know that a few people or a few companies refuse to change, or they just don't invest in change, or transforming their businesses. Why does it happen?
That's a really interesting question. There are a number of different reasons. And actually, what I'd like to first start with is thinking about companies that, unfortunately, have been written into the history books now. Companies like Blockbuster, for example, that actually when you read some of their company strategies from just before they went bust, they make total sense. They're talking about all the right initiatives, the right strategies. They're talking about customer, they're talking about technology. And you'd say, yeah, let's get behind that company because they feel like they're on the right path. But obviously, history has happened and they weren't on the right path. So I think we talk about what the change is an awful lot, but we often don't talk so much about how a change or transformation is delivered. And that's kind of why I wrote the book, right? Because when we've got a great idea, if we can't make that idea happen, if we can't bring it into reality and execute effectively, it's pretty word on a brochure, right? And that's why I think there are a number of companies that have got the right ideas, but if you don't execute on those ideas, then you're running into trouble. And there's a whole number of reasons why you might not execute. You might be focusing on the wrong problems. You might have your head in the sand. You might be just looking at trends and thinking, it doesn't matter. You might not be listening to customers and making assumptions with the right view. You know what? I don't believe anyone is trying to be malicious and trying to bring their company down, right?
Yeah, nobody's like, I woke up today, I want to ruin this business.
Great, I'm going to cause chaos. Everyone is making the decisions that are in the best from their point of view. But if you are not being honest with yourself, then you don't truly understand the position that your company is in. You might then not be able to convert that problem into a meaningful solution. You know, we touched on people earlier. There's a whole challenge of different people elements, both from yourself as the leader, your team, and obviously the frontline. And then, of course, you may just struggle to make things happen, which again is one of the elements I find many retailers really struggle with. You know, we're talking about an idea. We have a great meeting, let's say a board meeting, exec meeting, whatever. Everyone's agreed, aligned. We've got a clear plan of action. We go away and we come back next month and we have the same conversation. And it can feel like, you know, what's going on here? We're trying to make progress and nothing is happening and
I was
problems
going to ask, you must have, like, your job must be very difficult because I think everybody has in their mind, I want to transform the business and be more successful. But the execution is so hard. They just refuse to change or etc. How do you manage those egos, or I wouldn't call ego, maybe these people that want to do the change, but they're not ready, I would say.
Well, and I think first and foremost, let's just recognize that everyone is trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But even within a company, you've got many different, you know, let's look at an exec team. You've got many different personalities, different objectives, different ideas of what right is. So first and foremost, even at an exec level, we are creating silos that mean one transformation doesn't fulfill all of those needs, or if it does, it's probably too broad in scope. So actually, that's where, as an organization, you need to be able to align really clearly. You need to be able to say, right, these are the options on the table. Everyone has their opportunity to share the reasons or the challenges they want to overcome and the approaches they can do it in. And then it comes down to a decision point where we were talking about prioritization earlier. We need to choose what we're going to do, and we need to choose what we're not going to do. And that's an important decision to make. And then once we have made that decision as an exec team, everyone needs to get on board.
And then I think it's another challenge, right? Like, all right, like finally we are aligned with what we have to do. Now let's convince everybody else.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so if it's the CMO, let's say, saying, actually, you know what, the COO's plan, do whatever, that's the plan we're going after. And that CMO then has to lead and support that change through their organization. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the marketing team, let's say, in this example, and not to pick on the marketing team.
Well, they usually are the ones that are being picked on.
Yeah. Well, following suit then, right? But it's choosing to back the transformation and say, look, this is what we're doing as an organization. This is the most meaningful change for our customers, for our colleagues, and ultimately for the business.
I think nowadays we have one tool that we didn't have for many years, but it's the access of data. What is the importance of data in a company's transformation?
So for me, the whole purpose of data is about changing the future for the better. We talk about turning data into insight, which is nice, but insight by itself doesn't mean that much, right? It's nice to have some charts and you think, oh, that's interesting. Question mark over that. That's interesting, but we'll come back to that. But actually, it's about turning that insight into action and taking the action. That's what's important. If the data doesn't positively affect the future, my view is it's a complete waste of resource and a big distraction for the company. So if we are not using data effectively to, like I say, change the future, we're not going down the right avenue. How many times have we looked at data and we've drawn some insights, but it's kind of been the exact same thing that we knew all along. Either we knew it in our hearts, or we knew it from experience, or we know it because it's just the same number as it was last week, last month, last year, whatever. So actually, how are you using data to really inform you on a new perspective? Because that's what's going to help you take a different action to change the future for the better.
So is it about how you read the data, I would say? Or collecting the right data, or?
All of the above. Yeah, you know, are you collecting the right data? Is it good quality data? And are you taking a new and novel point of view on that data, or are you cutting the same old trends week in, week out. Because if you are not looking for new insights, essentially genuinely new and interesting insights, then you're not going to find anything new, right? Data is about curiosity, which is one of my real passion topics, I suppose. And actually, how do we be more curious, more open, more honest as an organization when it comes to data? And we should also remember that data does not need to be just ones and zeros. There's all forms of data. You know, we talked about frontline colleagues. Frontline colleagues are talking to customers day in, day out. And every conversation is a source of data. It may be difficult to quantify, but it's valid, genuinely useful data. And so how are you harnessing, talking about collecting data, how are you harnessing all of these different data sources from around the organization? Not just saying, oh, well, we've got our POS data. We're just going to use that because that's all we've got. Let's use our imagination and look harder.
And that's an interesting question. How do you collect the data of the impression of the frontline workers? Right? Because I might say, oh, many customers are looking for this, but I don't put it anywhere. So this must be a challenge.
And how do you, as a broader question, how do you have an open two-way conversation with your frontline? And that's so important for transformation, and business as a whole, right? Very much it's the center pointing out communications to stores or to customer service centers or warehouses, whatever that is. And actually, how do you have that feedback back? And that's a really important conversation because the frontline is big, right? So it can be a vast set of data coming back. It can also be incredibly noisy as well. Lots of different variation. You've got some valid points in there. You will have absolutely some red herrings in there as well. So having a robust way of, I suppose, understanding the data is really important. So think, how are you going to offer your colleagues on the front line a genuine avenue to submit their viewpoint, to have that two-way conversation? And then how are you going to process it and how are you going to feedback as well?
Have you done it? Have you seen it? Have you done it? I'm very curious to see how it happens.
Absolutely. So, there's no, first and foremost, there's no one single best way of doing it, in my view. And just like you have a conversation with your customers, you want to open as many channels that make sense. So absolutely, I've been in places where we've set up, for example, email as a route in, along with different web submission forms to say, if you've got an idea to, the example I'm thinking of, to improve the replenishment processes, how can you submit that? And we will process it through and we'll come back to you. Obviously, social media is a big one. Now, you probably don't want to be having that conversation on a live social media, but on a private channel, then that's a great opportunity. We're blessed with lots of different communication channels right now. So let's make use of them. Let's open ourselves up to have that conversation with the front line.
That's very interesting. So it's giving they know everything because they're there dealing with every customer. And if you're not listening to them, how are you going to do the best for the customer? So it's giving the voice to them.
100%. And let's not forget the age-old conversation type of actually going and seeing the front line and talking to your colleagues and talking to your customers directly. And yes, it's a limited data pool, but wow, how rich is that? And we've seen a number of companies recognizing the importance of getting back and getting out to the front line and spending time in stores or speaking to customers on the telephone, whatever that channel is. That's a great opportunity. And in my view, every hour, every day is just a hugely rewarding experience.
I saw a podcast interview with a retailer that he was saying that everybody in the headquarters had a store day. So everybody, the finance people, the procurement, so they understand what their work are doing in their store.
Yep.
So that it gives the purpose of serving that customer and not creating something that is just internal, right? It's very interesting.
Exactly. And I think that drives part of the culture as well, so that it doesn't come a diktat from, leadership, like you must go and spend one day in store. That's not the way we want this, right? It's actually you want to go and spend a day in store because you can spend it with your ever so insightful colleagues, the customers. You can see things in real life. Ultimately, in retail, real life is on the shop floor. It is talking to customers, and we can't lose sight of that.
And you have experience in grocery, and retail is so much more fashion and etc. I think each of them has a different challenge.
Yes.
But often when I think about data and etc., I always think about grocery for some reason, because I think like it's where we have to go often.
Yes.
Have you worked with different types of retailers? And
yeah, so I work cross-category now because I believe there is so much great learning to take from, let's say, grocery into fashion, into home, into tech, etc. There's so many similarities between the different categories. And yes, of course, there are going to be some unique use cases. You know, grocery does not need to think about fitting rooms so much as fashion, right? But technology doesn't need to think about the cold chain like grocery does. But actually, yes, those are category-specific elements, but understanding the customer, thinking about elements like supply chain or pricing or ranging, you know, it's the same decision, right? We're just talking about different aspects.
And what is I have a challenge between technology transformation. So the digital transformation. I think everybody puts the technology in the first when they're thinking about transformation.
I'm feeling the sweat beads coming. I have an allergic reaction to digital transformation because you're absolutely right. We say digital transformation and we think technology. It sets our expectation and expectations of those around us about the technical solution. And when we're talking about transformation, it's so much more than just that. You know, we must think about the people, we must think about processes, we must think about customers. And if we're thinking about digital transformation, we are at risk of either in our own heads or those around us switching off focus on those other crucial topics and just thinking about technology will solve everything. And that's certainly a challenge that a number of retailers have come into in terms of we've got this fantastic technical solution, but we haven't really done the due diligence on making sure that it's, let's say, customer-centric or thinking about how we're actually going to deploy this to colleagues. And that's where execution can fall over very easily.
Because they're focusing first on technology. Is that thing that people say tech for tech and not tech for the business solution and etc.
Absolutely.
And would you be a retailer?
Would I be a retailer? I would absolutely be a retailer for the right opportunity. I think I've toyed with the idea, but it's, you know, such an exciting area. I love retail. The whole reason that I first started in retail was because it's an industry where everyone has an opinion. Everyone is a customer, whether we like to do shopping or not.
Yeah, we must be talking here about the corporate decisions, but at the end of the day, we're going to the store every day, right?
Absolutely. Everyone has an opinion. You know, everyone knows a good experience or a bad experience. Everyone has got their favorite store or their least favorite.
What is your favorite retailer?
My favorite retailer would be Toolstation, which is a bit of a personal passion project. I'm big on renovations, but I particularly love what Toolstation do with essentially omni-channel, right? They've got super fast click and collect, and Screwfix are a very close second, I have to be honest, for a very similar retailer, obviously direct competitors, but fantastic ranging, fantastic customer experience, and great omni-channel execution.
Awesome. So who do you wrote this book for?
So I wrote this book for retail leaders who ultimately recognize they must change, right? There is a number of different reasons why the world is changing and evolving, and retailers have a choice now. They must choose to change with the world, or you choose to take the passive view and see what happens, right? I would absolutely not suggest the passive point of view. So I wrote this for retail leaders that say, you know what, we need to make change happen as an organization. And this is a guidebook for those leaders and for those that are driving transformation to say, how do we do this? How do we make sure we're focused on the right challenges? How do we make sure that we're delivering meaningful change? And how do we make sure we're doing it in the right way?
And I heard you got a lot of good feedback already.
I've been blown away by the feedback. It's just wonderful to hear people picking up the book and literally finding actionable takeaways within minutes, essentially, in terms of, you know, that's why I write it, right? It's for people to make meaningful change, to, similar to data, to change the future for the better. And if the book can help companies do that, then that puts a massive, great big smile on my face. There
was one takeaway that it posted about the customer.
Absolutely. I loved that. Why don't Tell us a little bit more about it.
I knew it was coming. That if we want to surprise and delight our customer, we can ask them what they want because they're not going to be surprised. So we have to see the data, the trends, and etc., and then do something to delight them.
Absolutely.
Do you have an example of someone that did that?
So the
Apple.
The classic example is Apple, right? And let's go for the iPhone, because no one was saying we need smartphones, right? Or the iPad as well. No one was saying we need
iPod or like anything really.
And actually, when you go back and you can find the very first Apple iPhone launch video with Steve Jobs giving the presentation at the conference on YouTube. And that's a really interesting watch because the way he spins the story as to you, consumers, you don't need this. But it's the most amazing thing that is going to change your world. And how he spins that story and he blends the three different technologies together is just a wonderful example of
delighting,
surprise and delight. Yeah, absolutely. The other classic example is a classic quote from Henry Ford. And it said, if I asked people what they want, they'd have said faster horses and not the first car, essentially. And I love that quote, and it's included it in the book for a reason. But we can, I'm sure, all reflect on those times where we've been delighted, genuinely delighted by a retail experience because we didn't expect it. When we expect something, it doesn't surprise us. In fact, actually, when we expect something, if it's not there, that's when we get frustrated. So it's the difference between a delighter versus standard quality versus expected quality.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Oliver. It's been a blast having you here on the other side of the microphone this
Absolutely.
time.
Well, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been wonderful and love what you're doing with OFFBounds as well.